From childhood lessons to life-changing loss, Stephen Seidel has learned that every chapter has something to teach us. In this conversation, we dive into the importance of connection, storytelling, and embracing life's adventures with an open heart. Welcome to Journey with Jake. This is a podcast about adventure and how through our adventures we can overcome the challenges of life that come our way. While I expect you will learn some things about different adventures, this show will entertain you. Each episode will feature a different guest or guests as they share experiences and stories from the different adventures they have been on. Not only will you be entertained, but you will also hear the failures and trials each guest faces and what they have done or are doing to overcome the hardships that come their way. My goal is to take each of us on a journey through the experiences of my guests with the hope that you'll be entertained and inspired to overcome your day-to-day challenges. After all, it's not all about the destination as it is about the journey. Dive into my conversation with Stephen Seidel. Just a quick reminder to check out Journey with Jake on YouTube. You can actually see my guests, catch their expressions, and feel even more connected to their stories. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. It really helps others discover the show. A huge thank you to the Podmatch Podcast Network for helping connect incredible guests like Stephen to podcasts like this one. And if you enjoyed today's episode, go back and listen to episode 50 with Mario Minert. We talk about his incredible experience competing in the Ultraman Florida, the physical and mental battles that come with it, and the deeper why that keeps him pushing forward. All right, let's jump into my conversation with Stephen Seidel. All right, I'm excited today. I've got Stephen Seidel joining me. Stephen, welcome to Journey with Jake.
Thank you so much for having me on, Jake. Appreciate the opportunity. It's an honor to be here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to kind of hear your journey, your story, who you are. I like what you're doing. I know you've spoken TEDx. You've done that.
Of
You've
course.
done all kinds
the goal is we got to inspire the next generations to be the best version of themselves. Because I'm on the second, I'm on the second act or maybe the third act. So I got to keep it moving.
Well, I'm definitely heading in that direction.
The back nine, sure. If you will.
The back nine, right? Exactly. Before we jump into kind of your story, I want just the background, where you're from, where you grew up.
Yeah, thanks so much for asking. So I was born in Utica, New York when I was 1. So that's upstate New York. My father worked for the same company his whole life. It was initially called Univac, then it became Sperry, then it became Unisys, and they were headquartered there. When I was 1, we moved just outside of Philadelphia. So I say Philly, and everybody's like, did you really grow up in Philly? I'm like, okay, it was the suburbs, but it was the suburbs of Philly. My parents divorced, so my dad was in Norristown, and my mom was in Doylestown. And so it was a great upbringing. I had a really wonderful cul-de-sac. I love the cul-de-sac life. Right now, I live in a street where the cars go zipping by, and I want to get a cul-de-sac to be safe for those kids. I have 2 kids, 5 and 11. But yeah, grew up outside of Philadelphia. And, I was always, I don't want to say slow. I was very accomplished, but I was slow to grow. I was 5'3" when I graduated high school. So I was really talented at sports and athletics and academics, but I was always the shortest kid. And so that weighed a lot on me as a child. Like looking back, I think it was really cool for me to be able to navigate those spaces, but not growing until I reached college. I grew, I think 8 inches, but as a child, I grew up, I loved sports. I loved television. I loved shows. I loved watching Pee-wee's Playhouse. I really enjoyed, Punky Brewster. And I ended up working with both of those individuals later on in life. I worked with Suleiman Fry. I worked with Paul Rubens. And so it's fun to see a lot of these things in my childhood to come full circle and end up working with some of these people.
You've got to be close to my age then, because, I know Pee-wee and
yeah,
Punky
I'm pushing
Brewster.
50, brother. I'm 48.
Me too. I'm 48. Right on the nose. There we go.
There you go. So,
I love it.
Yeah, it was fun, growing up with cartoons. It's interesting because back in the day, I used to tell people I wanted to be like OJ. I would sit in my room. I really loved announcing. I love radios, broadcasting, athletes, all these different types of entertainment. Also love sports. It was like, who's the guy doing all 3 of these? OJ. He's announcing. He's playing sports. He's acting a Naked Gun. And then he went and killed somebody. So then I had to change my metaphor to Michael Strahan. So, or some of these other, entrepreneurial. And Michael Strahan even does game shows. And I used to love game shows, still do. Every night we would sit down and we would watch Jeopardy and Family Feud at the dinner table. And I would always say, when Family Feud came on, I would always say, kangaroo, 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 because kangaroo, I was obsessed with kangaroos. Still am, never been to Australia. But one time on the final answer, it came kangaroo, and my whole family went wild.
You did it,
You
finally.
did it. You finally got that right answer, Stevie. They used to call me Stevie, and then I couldn't say that, so then they started calling me TT. But nobody, and it's funny, like my old family members, my stepbrother lived with us for a while, and my father and my mother divorced, so that essentially put me on my journey of people pleasing. I'm a recovering people pleaser because I was caught in the middle. My mom's over here, my dad's over here, and I always was stuck in the middle. And I felt this need to try and keep them together or keep some sense of balance, whether it was financial, emotional. And so that really put me on the path of where I'm at, as a connector. But it took a little bit of rewiring, if you will, to set some boundaries and not put myself in the middle of everything. But I do feel like it all happened for a reason. And then my dream became to be a great dad because my dad was always traveling. He worked for Unisys. He was in Minnesota. He was in Atlanta. He would go to all the Braves games and he would come back with the tomahawk chops. And it was funny because Ted started TNT and CNN, and that was one of the few stations where you could always find sports. Like this is right around the early time of ESPN. And so I love the Phillies growing up in Philadelphia. I'm a huge Philly sports fan. I actually just got a tattoo about a month ago to honor my late father and my late stepfather. But I got the Eagles tattoo on my arm there.
Wow, there you go.
So yeah, I grew up watching it, but then we would watch the Braves because it was on TNT and you could always find the Braves. And so I grew up loving the Braves. And it turns out there was a second baseman on the team. His name was Mark Lemke. I don't know if you remember that name at all, but Mark Lemke, he was from Utica, New York. And so my grandmother knew his grandmother, and we would always cheer for Mark Lemke. And then one time he ended up crushing it. I think in one of the World Series, he got like a, game-winning RBI or something like that. But it was all about sports. It was all about movies and entertainment. And that kind of instilled the vibe of me of connection, because when you're watching sports, when you're listening to music or you're watching movies, you're bringing people together.
It's an interesting way to look at it. And really, a lot of life is about connection. How old were you when your parents got divorced?
So my parents divorced when I was 1. I never knew my mom and dad together. And I grew up with my father was in Norristown. And so he was always traveling. And that's what really created that dream in me to be a wonderful father. And now I'm a dad to 2 wonderful girls, but also it's my mission to be a champion and a pioneer and, a revolutionary leader for the vulnerable children within us and then future generations. But I grew up with my stepfather as well. And that's how I started watching the Eagles. Every Sunday, we would sit down and watch the Philadelphia Eagles. He would drink a Diet Pepsi and we would eat Fritos. So every time I watch the Eagles play, I get a Diet Pepsi and some Fritos. But the craziest story is, so later on in the year 2000, my sister ended up getting married, and it was, I think, was 9/11 in 2000 or was it 2001?
2001.
2001. Okay, so it was 2001 when my sister, I graduated to college in 2000. 2001, she was getting married, and it was 11 days after 9/11, and we didn't know if she was going to have the wedding or not. I mean, we've gone through so many major events of 9/11. You look at the pandemic, but I said, fuck it. Sorry, church. I say church when I curse around my kids, but I said, I'm going to do it. And so I flew back to the wedding, and my mom's like, Tom, he was my stepdad. She said, Tom is sick. I'm driving down. I'm like, what do you mean he's sick? And she says, he has cancer. And I didn't have too many encounters with cancer. Obviously I was aware of it, but I was too busy going to college and doing my thing. And it's not as prevalent as it is now. And then 6 months later, he died. And I was working at a company called Motorola out of college. I was really good at science and mathematics. So my parents pushed me towards Penn State. My sister went to Penn State. I went to science and mathematics, but I had this love of entertainment. So I was at Motorola at the time. I can come back to it later, but I ended up getting involved in entertainment later on. But I had a dream that my mom called me to tell me my stepdad died, and it happened exactly how I envisioned it. And it was like, Tom is sick. He died. He passed away, and she's crying. So I said, all right. I flew back, and on the airplane back, my favorite player watching the Philadelphia Eagles was Fred Barnett. Do you know Fred Barnett at all? He was number 86. If you remember Randall Cunningham, there was one great play where he avoided a sack, threw the ball down the field. It was like a 90-yard or 94-yard play for the Eagles. It was one of their biggest, most monumental plays in Eagles history. But anyway, he's my favorite player. I'm flying back to my stepfather's funeral. And who's on the last row of the plane? Fred Barnett on the way to
Wow.
his funeral. And it was just, that was one moment. I've had so many of these serendipitous moments. I talk a lot about it in my TEDx talk. But if we really just take time and reflect and realize that the path that we're on, it's unfolding as well it should, the journey like you speak towards. We might have an
Absolutely.
idea of where we're supposed to go, but they say, God laughs when we have plans and things happen. But then these little moments and these reminders are just there to reiterate that, it's okay. Just keep moving forward. Use this as an opportunity to grow. And then so he was in the back of the plane. And then flash forward to 2018, my dad was sick for about 5 years. And he had fallen and fell asleep, and he had lost some blood flow to his leg. He had to have his leg amputated. And I was living in California, and my mom called me and said, "Look, you should probably go check out your dad. I don't know how this is going to fare." So I flew from California to Pennsylvania, where my dad was at. He had just had his leg amputated. I have two half brothers. They're much younger than me. So they were like 18 or 19. I
Mm.
went and met with them, and I said, "Look, Dad, it's going to be all right. We're going to take care of Skylar and Dakota. It's going to be okay." And then he died the next morning. And it blew my mind that these people can be taken from you so quickly. But the reason I bring that story up is a friend of mine that I had met previously at a startup works for the Eagles. And she knew I was an Eagles super fan because of my stepfather and watching with my dad. And she said, "Look, we're going to roll out the red carpet for your dad. We're going to do all the things that we can." She literally sent a video from Merrill Reese. If you know anything about announcers, he's one of the most infamous announcers for the NFL films. Merrill Reese sent him a video and said, "Hey, I hope you feel better." And this is right when the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts. My dad wrote a video back and said, FaceTime video, said, "Pick a good one." They ended up drafting Jalen Hurts, but they were going to roll out the green carpet for my dad, and he didn't make it. And so the day we were getting ready to go down to Lincoln Financial to roll out the green carpet and celebrate my dad, somebody had taken a shower and the windows were all foggy. And then if you look in the windows, there was a little eagle that looks exactly like the one on my forearm. And so again, it's another reminder of these moments in life, the journey that we're on. Things happen, we're growing, we're using it as opportunity, the resilience, or failing forward. And so that's where I ultimately got this tattoo with them and their names on it. But to go back to where I was raised in Philly. I'm an underdog. I love Philly sports, and you're only as good as your word.
I love it. Your story includes a lot about, turning pain into purpose. And I
Sure.
know you spent a lot of time caring for your mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you talk about this in your TEDx talk quite a bit, but how did that experience transform the way you view connection?
Thank you for asking me that, by the way. I think as we grow older, you're 48, I'm 48, we start to lose people that are close in our lives. And we realize that everything that we have is an opportunity. Every day lived is a golden opportunity. You could go back to, if I could give you $1 million and you could go back to the day before my mom passed away, would you do that? Yes. So why wouldn't you live every day like it's your last or like it's worth $1 million? But she ended up I was doing a coaching call with Tony Robbins, and she called me and said, "Look, they found something in me. They found something in her lymph node." And so I had just relocated my business. She ended up moving into our spare bedroom. It was right during the pandemic, man. And the pandemic, we all know the pandemic. I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but it was the total epitome of disconnection. And like we were disconnected from our families, we were disconnected from our jobs. It was just so challenging. And so I put my wife and kids on an airplane. We were living in LA. I have a doomsday prepping friend who was like, "You better get out of there, bro. You better get out of there." He's like, "I know you were thinking of moving." So we left, at which point I'm in a new city, no friends, all my company's virtual, so I have no colleagues. I have a 1-month-old baby. We're living in a pandemic. My mom has cancer. She's moving in with me. And now the extra spare bedroom that I was working out of is now her room. So I had to run my business out of my laundry room. And dude, it was the most challenging time ever because there were so many people relying on me, my children, my wife, my mom, my business, my clients. And it was an excruciating amount of pressure. And I knew that there was no way out but up. And I had to take where I was at, turn that mess into my message. And so I started a men's group where I just needed a space. And there's podcasts and things where you can share your story, but I feel like you're not just going to throw it out there. You need a safe community of friends or individuals or people that you can chat with. So I created a men's group. It's called Gent's Journey. And I knew if I found the right people, it would work. And so I marinated and said, look, who are my growth friends? Who are the people that are going to help me grow? Because what we go through, we grow through. And so I landed on my entrepreneurial friends, flexible schedules.
Hmm.
They know how to take risks. I wanted them to be a dad because I was a dad, because they're probably having the same problems. Ideally, they're married or been through relationships. And so I found 5 friends like that, and we started just meeting every Monday and sharing our stories. And for me, it was losing my mom. Another guy lost his job. He went bankrupt. Another guy lost a huge client from a litigation where there was some IP involved. Another guy lost his child at a custody battle. So we were all dealing with different types of loss. And for me, it was apparent then that I had to work through losing my mom. She was going to pass away, and she did pass away. And there was a lot of serendipitous moments to that as well. Driving away from the moment that I was the last person to see my mom and my dad alive. And sometimes I think about that, and it's a blessing in hindsight, I believe, because they were spending those last moments. Like jumping in the car, first song that I hear is Stairway to Heaven. My mom loved classical rock, and dude, it was the most wild experience because I spent the last 3 hours watching my mom struggle to breathe and I FaceTime every single member of my family because I wanted them to be able to say their goodbye. My sister was there, and she was crying, like, just go to the light. You could do these things. And then finally she left. One of the final songs that we played, she used to love Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And I saw her look at me. I didn't, she wasn't really responding much, but I saw her eye look at me, and Somewhere Over the Rainbow came on, and like a single tear just came down her face. And that was a moment where it was obviously, to me, she went to the next level or wherever you go in life. But jumping in the car, the first song after that, I turned on the radio was Stairway to Heaven. And they talk about buying her and she's buying the Stairway to Heaven. And it was just, these are all just teaching moments for me. Everything in life, I started taking these meetings and realizing that things happen in life to teach us things. And she had always talked to me about being a coach, being a therapist. You're so good. You work wonderful with people. And I had been doing my agency, PR, and media. So I think in passing, I had always wanted to do a TEDx talk. I think she gave me that gift. And it took me 20 years. Just like when I talked a lot about Pee Wee Herman and Punky Brewster, Soleiman Fry, I went to LA, and about 20 years after I watched their TV shows, I ran into them and I started working with them. So all these major moments in my life, I've noticed have taken around 20 years to take shape. And so just being patient, running the course, going on the journey, taking what you're given and figuring out how can I use this to my advantage. And we don't have to go to work. We get to go to work. And I struggled a lot. I was trying to go for happiness. And working with my friends and some other groups, they're like, no, you need to come from happiness. When we come from happiness and we accept happiness and we make that choice in our life, that's when all the wonderful things could come around and present themselves.
I was just loving what you were saying there. I don't know. It makes me think, okay, are those little lessons, those things that are out there, how come it's so hard for people to find them or see them if they're all around us like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we talk a lot, and when I coach with like C-suite and executives and things, there's just to me, at the end of the day, it's all about stories. And that's where growing up as a connection piece, it's about connection. You can talk about influence, you can talk about marketing, you can talk about sales, whatever you do. At the end of the day, it's about connection. If you don't connect with people, then they're not going to trust you. If they don't trust you, then they're not going to be willing to spend their time or spend their money or the clicks or however you want to do that. But in order for them to do so, the connective tissue there is story, because story gets to the heart of emotion, and that allows people to be empathetic. That allows people to experience you. At the end of the day, Michael Caine used to say, I don't want to hold up a screen and say, look at me while I'm acting. I want to hold up a mirror and say, look at you. But the only real way to do that, I think, is by leveraging your story. And so there's the movie of me that one of my mentors, Pat Croce, says, we all have this movie of me, or the stories that we tell ourselves. Woe is me, I'm a victim. And So as men or as an individual, what we talk a lot about in Jen's Journey, my group, is, you can be the gentleman who is given hard times and just says, okay, I'm given hard times. You can be the man that says, that's given hard time. You can say it's because of that person. You point at one person, three point back at you. You can be given a hard time and say, okay, what can I do with this? And how am I going to overcome that? And so I think part of that is the story that we tell ourselves and the story that has been ingrained in our head. Like I talked about being a people pleaser at a young age. There's nature versus nurture. There's some of the DNA that may have been passed on from a hereditary perspective, but how can we reframe that story so we eliminate those limiting beliefs and we say, look, achieving my dream is possible. I don't know how it's possible, but just taking the first step is going to get me closer to that. And I think it works with having that awareness. And one of the things that we talk a lot about is about being great. And so these moments are happening around us, but if you're great, then you will recognize them. And great is an acronym. I'm a huge fan of acronyms. So being great is being grateful. And one of the ways that you can be grateful is being aware. You can have a journal. The second part of great is reflective. It's thinking about your day. Okay, how did that go? How could I respond differently? We do another thing called the sacred shift. Instead of responding or reacting right away and all that ingrained behavior just comes out and you yell or you flip out, take a beat and reflect on that. And then the E in great stands for empathetic. Everybody has something else going on in their lives. So, they might have lost their dad. They might have lost their dog. They may have been diagnosed with cancer. Who knows? We all have baggage. And the more empathetic that we can be and the more that we can connect heart to heart, as opposed to getting in our head, the better that we'll be and the more we'll recognize some of these moments. And then the A stands for accountable. And so if we say we're going to do something, do it. And then the T is transformational. And to me, that's where you can transform. And there's a couple of like simple shifts that we talked about. You don't have to go to work. You get to go to work just by living in America. If you're listening to this in America, you won the lottery, man. Like you have the ability. You're not in a third world country or somewhere else where there's tyranny or communists. Or I know there's some issues with the country, obviously. But for somebody who's listening to this, to me, it's take notice of some of these things that are happening. And a lot of it is the serendipity. When you think it's a coincidence, it's really not a coincidence. And those are the moments where if you just take a step back, write it down in your journal and figure out how can I use this to become better? How is it working for me? Why is it happening for me, not to me? Just simple shifts like that where we can be aware of these things that are happening.
I love it. And it's, as a man, and me and you are, we're the same age, 48 years old. Growing up, it was, men didn't cry and men didn't show their feelings, and you be tough and that sort of thing. And it wasn't, the pandemic for me was that moment where, I broke down. I had a moment where I broke down because I lost my job. I'm in the trade show live events industry and it's gone overnight, like no more. So when you get those five of you guys together and you're telling these things, how do you make it like a safe place for that? Because it's hard to kind of overcome that, what we've
Sure.
grown up with.
That's a great question. So I will say I was very selective in the process because I knew these individuals were I just knew them. And that's why I hand selected them and brought them together. And I said, look, if you guys want to bring in friends, you can. One gentleman brought somebody in. He came in for like a meeting and then they dipped. But with that, I knew that I've worked with these. They had a great heart. I'd had various projects where one of them was a fraternity member of mine. He was the president and he lost his dad in 9/11. His dad was holding the door for we spoke about 9/11. His dad was last seen holding the door for his colleagues and they never found him. And so it was called Hold the Door Foundation. And he created this foundation so that people could learn from this resilience. And for somebody like that, I knew he had gone through some things and he has a PhD. He's extremely smart. He's a psychologist. So he was in the group. A buddy of mine, we used to create content. I talked about being an engineer in mathematics. Then I went the other way, creating media and shows. We had sold a show and he had the biggest kahunas I've ever seen. He would do the most amazing things, but his heart was huge. And then another gentleman, he runs a podcast called The Meaningful Show. And so he was all about self-help. And he knew every pioneer in the self-help or nonfiction space. He had this thing called flashbooks, where he takes self-help books, distills them down into 10 minutes or 10-page PDFs. So if you want somebody who has a resource of all the things that you can do to overcome it. So I knew with those gentlemen in the group, there's another gentleman, his name was Chris. He had started a company called Seidels, and it was all about spreading wildflowers and making sure that we could help overcome the bees. He's built multi-million dollar companies. But the safe space to share, it all came down to just simply asking the questions and building that bond. And it doesn't happen overnight, but you have to be courageous enough to share and have the grit. So for me, I say grit. Again, gratitude is always a part of it, resilience, integrity, and trust. And we started asking questions, and I was running the meetings, but then gentlemen suggested, hey, can we switch it a little bit? Can other people run the meetings? So we would start it with a question. So one of the questions was, what does masculinity mean to you? And to your point, masculinity now is 10 times different than it was back in the
Yeah.
day. And we talked about our dads. You know, my dad was a first sergeant. I got my ears pierced. He's like, I'm going to rip those things out. Of course, he never did. But that was all a front. His heart was huge. He was a very kind man. But, you know, he had the only time I think I saw him cry was when his mom died. But that's not how it is nowadays. We want to be there. We want to be present. We want to love our children. We want to show them that we created the 7 pillars of manhood. So there's family, friends, faith, finances, fitness, fun. There's one more that I'm missing, but we have those pillars that we would build around. And so we would ask these questions. So we created this journey deck here. We talk a lot about the journey. So this is our journey deck. We tried to create another meeting with other gentlemen, and it was a little bit challenging because we weren't able to really build that camaraderie right out of the gate. So we felt as if we created this journey deck and took the most pertinent questions from our meetings, it could help other men open up with their loved ones, with their wives, with their children, and with us in advance in an icebreaker mentality, with the expectation that then you'll realize that this too can be a safe space. So I would love to ask you one of these questions.
All right. Yeah, let's do this.
Tell me when to stop.
All right. Stop.
Okay. So this is a lighter one. What does your perfect weekend look like?
Perfect weekend. All right. And this is my time to answer that, right? This is what the point of this is. I love it.
100%. And so when we answer these, it all goes back to connection. You open up. We're not talking about your cell phone or what the weather's like. We're sharing our experience. And so, yeah, tell us what your perfect weekend looks like.
Perfect weekend is a early out at work. I'm talking early afternoon, 1 or 2, and it's maybe getting a little nap in before the evening. And then that evening, Friday evening, going out to eat somewhere with my wife. And then she and I going and doing something together. We like to hike on a trail kind of up in the base of the mountains. I'm in Utah, so that's got mountains around here.
Nice.
So that's just Friday. But then Saturday, maybe sleeping in a bit. I like to get up and exercise in the morning. So I'll get up fairly, before she does. But I'll get up and exercise a little bit. Maybe I'll work on the podcast a little bit just to kind of, because I love doing that. I love just this connection I have. Do that. And then hopefully I'll see my sons. I got 2 older sons who are both married and have little girls. So I got a couple granddaughters.
Wow, you're a grandfather. Look at you.
I am yeah, you're right behind me.
Crazy.
So.
My girls are 5 and 11. They're not quite there yet.
You got a few years, but
yeah.
So hopefully, I could spend time with them. And I have 2 other kids I have a daughter who's 15. She's usually performing in a dance of some sort. I'd love to watch her dance. So for me, it's doing the things with those I love, those that I'm close to. That would be the ideal weekend for me, would be doing that.
That's awesome, man. I'm going to do a follow-up question. I have and so that's what it is. We open up. And so I took these cards to the Fatherhood Initiative locally in Lexington, and there are people coming out of prison, penitentiaries, and I facilitated the whole meeting. And I get goosebumps every time I talk about it, because that's the work. Like, I can go and help companies market, which, work with Coca-Cola, Amazon, all that. Like, we can put your stuff on billboards and get you the highest status. But to see these gentlemen show the courage. One of these guys was asked, who do you have to forgive? And one of the questions was, who do you have to forgive? And he said, I have to forgive myself. He's like, in order for me to move past all this, I need to forgive myself. And then I can have a closer relationship with my children, who I'm trying to rebuild. And he's tatted from head to toe, crying, in and out of jail. He had a really raspy voice from Boston. And I was like, man, this is all that work and all these meetings that we have. We put down a card. He's answering the question in the card, and he's truly transforming his life just by answering that. Like, yours was great too, the perfect weekend. What I would love to know is, as a grandfather, what would you tell your grandkids if you could leave them a message? Let's say, God forbid, you're not here tomorrow and you wanted to leave them a message. What would you tell them?
I think I would tell them to believe in themselves, to have faith in themselves, that they can do anything they want. I think that's something personally I've struggled with is, can I do things? Can I make things happen? And I want them to know that they can and
Yeah,
that they are important and that they can make things happen.
I love that. Yeah, and so that's essentially what we do in our group is we talk about, marital issues, finance, whatever. And to go back to my mom, she was the catalyst for me starting this group. And so you think, oh, I wish this thing would have never happened. But, at the end of the day, it did happen. And how can I leverage it to continue to grow and impact more people? And so that's our mission at my company is to do good, give back, make an impact. But as a result of my mom passing, I spent 2 years with her living in my house, would have never experienced that. Did a TEDx talk. I built this men's group. I helped this guy who was crying, tatted from head to toe, and now helping. We have a group of 6,000 people on Substack. And so there was something that was hanging in her kitchen that I talk a lot about. It was a quote. I can't remember who says it, but I talk a lot about it. We talk a lot about it in our group. And the quote was, to the world, you might be one person, but to one person, you might be the world. And so anybody who's listening that's in a tough spot or feels like my story doesn't matter, your story does matter. And that's really what my mission is to help make dreams a reality. And the way that we do that is by truly just sharing our story. And in my TEDx talk, I talk about, being down and out and creating a 3-step process. We need to reconnect. What are we reconnecting to? Reconnect to yourself, your purpose, be the whole, be the hole that the Christ breath flows through, like that music that comes through the flute. But when you reconnect, then you can rebuild. And if you don't have those right people around you, then find the right people around you so that they empower you to be the best version. And then lastly, you're going to reclaim your purpose. You're going to reclaim your story and you're going to reclaim that outcome.
You have so many great sayings, so many, great and what the different, each letter means. You have a lot of these fantastic things that, I mean, I need to like, I'm glad this is being recorded because now I can, tap back
Yeah.
into this again and
Thank you.
again and again. Yeah, no, this is awesome. One thing I want to talk about, you mentioned, the story, and we have a story to tell. Storytelling then. Why is storytelling so important?
Storytelling is extremely important because we are all on our own journey. I mean, we're talking about the journey with Jake. We're all on our journey, right? And who is the protagonist in our journey? We are, right? So, in order for us to be able to make an impact, to find some sense of purpose, like I talked about, connect, to rebuild, to reclaim, to find that purpose in our life. In my company, we do PR, but it's purpose relations and it starts with connection. And to me, connection is your currency. And like I talked about before, stories are the tissue that connects within the connection. So I want for the listeners, connect to your calling, connect to your purpose, connect to what you're here on this earth to do. It's different for each of us. And oftentimes people are like, oh, I don't know. I don't know what my purpose is. That's fine. What do you love to do? What keeps you up at night? What do you do 15 hours and then you don't even realize that the time is gone? Or what do you really dislike? Maybe you don't like animals that are mistreated and then maybe PETA or, standing up for these animals that aren't able to do so. It could be any of those things and it can change too, but connecting to your calling and then connecting to your community. So the people around you, like we talked about, making sure that you're connected with your husband, your wife, your family. Too often we just go about our day and we don't have that sense of connection. And then lastly, we want to connect to our company, the company that we keep or the company that we work for. Is there cultural alignment there? Making sure that these values and beliefs are the same. But the fastest way to connect to them is through story. And I'll use Joseph Campbell as an example. He wrote The Hero's Journey. And so we all have that in our life. We have the inciting incident where we're in a tough moment where we feel like we can't do something. For me, I talked about my mom getting cancer. And then if you pay attention to any movie or any story that happens, there's always somebody that partners with the hero, whether or not it's a person, a place that they go back to, or an animal. Usually it's a best friend or a love interest. I'm sorry, that's the B story. But so the hero's on their path. They have somebody that reinstills a sense of purpose, a sense of hope, gets them to realize the story you've been telling yourself that you're not good enough, that you can't do it is wrong because you can. And then the hero goes on the journey and they get to the point where it's the end of Act Two, where all is lost. Again, any movie you think, oh, they're not going to be able to make it. Something else happens because life is cyclical. It goes up and it goes down. And then again, they start telling themselves all of these things. At this point, the friend sometimes drifts away and it's up to the hero to make the final decision and say, yes, I can do this. And they bring us to the homeland. And so without that story that we are telling ourselves and the story that we're telling others, it's almost impossible to connect because we need to see ourselves in you as a mirror. And in order for us to do so, there has to be a story. Because if I stand up here and talk about, statistics and analytics and such said, then people really can't connect with that. So I think without the story, it's next to impossible to connect with these individuals and hopefully move forward.
And it's amazing too. And I think this podcast for me, Journey with Jake, has really made me realize that I have a story to tell myself. I used to just sit and listen to people's stories and think everyone has a story to say. And that's why I'm doing this, because I get to hear people's stories and live through them. But then it made me realize that I've got my own story, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate the things I've learned from people like you, guests like you, have really made me think like, yeah, I've got my own story to tell, and it's important to tell as well, which I love. I want to ask you about, again, that you mentioned the journey deck cards and how, the guy from prison, from Gent's journey.
Yeah.
Just maybe an example, and obviously you don't need a name or anything, but maybe an example of someone who's been in the group, or just an example of how it's helped somebody, or just a story from that.
Yeah. So one of the gentlemen who joined our group, his name's Matt McManus, close friend of mine. Him and I created a show a while back. So to go back to story, we were both actors in LA, and he met a gentleman who he connected with. Connection is currency. And this guy became somewhat of a father figure for him. And he said, "Hey, you need to come down." They were opening up a restaurant. He said, "Look, you're going to work here at this restaurant. You need to come down here right now because we need to have a staff for this wait staff by 9 o'clock at night. And you need to put out a Craigslist ad." And he was like, "Okay." And so he put out a Craigslist ad where they were looking for wait staff. And I was in LA at the time. I was, an actor. I basically found any job that I could. I did everything under the sun. And so I saw this ad. I was like, "Oh, they need wait staff." I went down there and I met this guy, Matt. This was 2008, maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. And I met him and we got to talking. And it turned out that we both shared this. We both had done the Disney's college program. So Disney goes around to different colleges and they hand select students. My sister did it before. She told me about it. She was like, "Look, you need to do it. They come to Penn State. You need to do it." I was like, "Okay, great. I get to go down to Disney. Wonderful." So this gentleman, Matt, was hiring people, and I talked about the Disney's college program. He said, "Look, I did that." And then it was that shared experience. Again, going back to story and connection. And had I not mentioned that or put that on my resume, and then we started talking about where we worked and all. And so right away we had a connection. He ultimately hired me because we had a shared experience. We had a story in common. We ran that nightclub for a while. Then we found out we both made content. So we made a show. We ended up selling a show for a while and then became really close friends. But it all came back to that shared experience where we connected over a similar story. And when you can connect and share these stories that people can see themselves in you or you see themselves in them, that really builds that rapport so that you can move forward. Flash forward later on, he's still in LA and I knew of him. He was a close friend of mine. He came into the group and he said, "Look, I don't feel right being in this group because all you guys are entrepreneurs, but I'm not." And I said to him, "Look, why are you not an entrepreneur? You've sold a TV show. Now you're auditioning." He's like, "I'm just a creative type. I'm an actor and I'm just sort of pursuing things that I feel as if maybe I shouldn't be here because, you're running a PR agency. Dean's running multiple companies. He's doing the book recaps. My other friend, Chris, was doing the Seidels company with the seed balls. My friend Rob was there doing some other things." And so after all these meetings, he found the strength and the perseverance and he had a story to tell. And he created a video training series called The Cartoon, and how you could take your own experiences and your own stories and create your own character. And how when you leave the room, your character is ultimately what people say about you when you've left the room. And he has all these really amazing experiences that he came up with, like basically designing your own sneakers was one of them because he's a big sneakerhead. But think about the sneaker that you've always wanted. And it's symbolic, it's a metaphor for the life that you've always wanted. Think about the sneakers that you've always wanted, design them, and then think about, how you would feel wearing them. And then he eventually says, "Now I want you to go out and buy them and then wear them." And when you go into these meetings or when you go out on the street, feel that sense of courage or feel that sense of, empowerment and how it feels. And so by him coming into our meeting, he learned from us and he also experienced all of our energy. We talked about overcoming certain things and he put together this course, did really well. And now he's creating amazing content for Gent's Journey. He just created one called Packing for Purpose, very similar, where you're recapping who you are and all the things that you can take on a trip. And one of the exercises, think about all things that you want to take on a trip, or is it going to be, if you had to go on a trip and pack everything in one bag, what would you bring in that bag? And some of these items and some of these accessories are a clue into your ultimate purpose. But by working with us in Jen's journey, he rewrote the story in his head that he wasn't an entrepreneur. He took risks. He created the course. And now he's bringing all that and all the amazing content to the other gents in the Gents Journey community.
I love it. That's a great example. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I've got a few more questions. I'm going to kind of ask a little bit about adventure. But before I do that, I did want to ask you, because you kind of left a little teaser, in the email that you sent me about Lou Ferrigno and choking
Yeah.
you or something like that.
Yeah.
I got to hear that story. So tell me that story.
Sure. So growing up, I was a big superhero fan. I had Incredible Hulk underwear. Remember Fruit of the Loom Hulk underwear? I had those.
I had those too. I had this.
Yeah, we all had those. That was a rite of passage. Now there's just 1,000 different types of underwear, but I was a big Hulk fan. And we went to see him, and I don't even know, 4 or 5 or something around that. And we went to a mall because Lou Ferrigno plays the Hulk. He wasn't the original one. He was one who turns into the crazy guy at his pants rip. So he was in the mall. I used to love lifesavers. And so we were waiting in line, and I was sucking on a lifesaver, and then I started choking on it. And I couldn't breathe. And my mom was trying to help me, and my grandmother, I grew up around a lot, my dad was often traveling, so I was around a lot of women, and they couldn't figure out what to do. And then he shook me upside down, and then the lifesaver came out. So he essentially saved my life from my lifesaver. So he was literally a superhero who saved my life from a lifesaver, and my favorite superhero character. And to go back to all these individual moments, it's just, and then when my mom passed away, my sister was looking through all of the paperwork, and I was working on putting together my keynote and talking about some of these cool moments that essentially just take shape or visualize. Sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's subconscious, sometimes I set an intention and it happens. But just like we talked about earlier, having this awareness of some of these things that take shape, knowing that we're on the right path. And I was working on my keynote, and the Lou Ferrigno story is one piece of that. And she found the piece of paper from when they took me to the doctor afterwards to check me to make sure that I was okay and didn't have any scarring or anything. But it was literally right around the time that I was writing my keynote. And so, yeah, he saved my life.
What a story. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. I love that. Now, so Journey with Jake, I say it's an adventure podcast, and I have a lot of crazy adventures, but even just people's journeys, can be an adventure. But for you, it's going to be a 2-part question. But the first question is, for you, what does adventure mean to you?
Yeah. So for me, adventure means, I say this a lot. If it's fun, it gets done. And so with everything that we do, I want it to be a sense of play. And as we get older, society beats us down, or you have businesses, and we lose the sense of play. And so that's where I talk about, we don't have to go to work, we get to go to work. But for me, it's finding a sense of play. And with that, losing all sense of time. And one of the things that I've worked a lot on, I have a lot of neurospiciness with anxiety and sleep and all that, is really doing my best to stay in the present moment. Because if we start worrying about what happened in the past or how we can change that, I mean, what good does that do? Or like Michael J. Fox says, when we worry about what's going to happen in the future, our body fully experiences it. And if it happens again, then you experience it again. So cross that bridge when you come to it. But for me, adventure would be finding that sense of play, finding that sense of presence, and finding that sense of peace. I'm a big fan of the rule of 3. And when I moved to Kentucky from LA, a lot of that started to take shape because it's just very peaceful, it was positive. But I think if you're finding that play, and usually, like we talked about earlier, it'll be some of these things that you love. I tell all my clients, make lists of all the things that you love, make lists of the shows, figure out why you like those shows and deconstruct them. But within them, when you crack them open, is that sense of adventure. And a close friend of mine, he used to write on The Neighborhood. He's a writer out in LA. He does this thing, it's called Survivor in a Day. And my guilty pleasure right now is Survivor, the TV show. Because when I was younger, back in the 2000s, I worked at Motorola. Like I think I talked about you earlier. When I flew back to my stepfather's funeral, I was working at Motorola. I was an engineer. I didn't have very many friends, so I would sit down and watch Survivor. And that was my friend every night. I would be like, tune in to Survivor, Richard Hatch, all that stuff. And then I went through life, and then I got to Kentucky again, and it was a lot more quieter. There weren't nightlife and things like that. Then I started investing in Survivor again. I loved it because there was that sense of connection. There was that sense of play. There was that game show element. There was just the cinematography on it is brilliant. Jeff Probst is an amazing host, and I like hosting and talking, and he's just so many positive things in that show. And so for me, I connected with that. My friend does this thing called Survivor in a Day where he does it in his backyard in Tarzana, just outside LA. And I just did it like 2 weeks ago because I timed it up with fall break. And I said, look, we're staying an extra day and we're going to do it. And for me, it was one of the most satisfying adventures in my life because, like I talked about, it was fun. I was playing. It was like a sense of peace. I conquered some fears too because I have some issues with my ears. And I was always worried about not being on the real Survivor because I can't go underwater. But I said, you know what? I'm going to put in my earplugs and put on swim caps and just go for it. And I was this close to winning it, dude. I got to the final 4 people. If I had won one of the challenges, I would have been in the jury and I had everybody's vote because I was a likable dad and all that. And then it went to the next challenge where the ball comes down, you have to catch the golf ball and you add more. And then I dropped that one. So I ended up 4th, but everybody that I spoke to said, look, you had my vote. And I won an immunity that saved me. I did another guy played his immunity idol on me and then he got voted out. But like I was right there and it was the most enjoyable time of my life. And that to me was adventure.
It's fantastic. I love that. And I love Survivor. So hearing that story we've got a lot
Doing
in
all the
common, you and I.
all the challenges that
Yeah.
you see on the show, they were all on it, man. Check it out. It's Survivor in a Day. It's on Instagram.
Survivor in a Day. That is
You
cool.
should submit.
Okay.
If you want to submit, I'll let my buddy's name is Ryan Noggle. He's a brilliant
Survivor in a
man. He's a
Day.
writer. He also wrote a musical about Pete Rose. Like he's just anything he does. Another one of those people, like your product, 5 closest people around you. He's just a very brilliant man. And I knew that he was going to do it well and he did.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. Staying on that subject of adventure. So if you had to describe your life right now as an adventure, what chapter would you be in?
So we talk a lot about that in our men's group, how, when we go through our life, it's you're closing on one chapter, you're opening another chapter. Or, I mentioned I'm probably in the 2nd to 3rd act of a play. So in the chapter of my life, are you looking for, a word or a description?
Description's good. Yeah. Well, maybe description, what you think.
So when I talked about my mom, I often refer to it as the perfect storm because there was just so many pieces that were happening. My sister and I ended up becoming estranged for a period of time because of like talking about the house and a multitude of things. So there was just a lot of discomfort, dis-ease, a lot of things in my life that were very rocky and very bumpy. I think right now I'm at the calm after the storm. There's a lot of really wonderful things that are happening and I'm allowing myself to settle into them. And even with that, there are a lot of things that are maybe not going as planned or in my journey deck. There's a question of when did something bad turn out to be good? Like we put a label on things that it's bad, but really it's paving the way or opening up a door towards another opportunity. So right now, I think things are really going tremendously. And sure, there's going to be loss, there's going to be suffering, there's going to be pain. But I'm in a good space now where I'm able to really work towards who I am, working with a therapist on some of my neurodiversity, trying to work and get my sleep in order. I have like 3 more weeks on my braces. I've been working out, eating spinach every day. I eat spinach every morning. I feel like Popeye. But so to me, it's the calm after the storm. And I feel probably the most healthiest or the healthiest I've ever been, but just the most clear and intentional. And so right now is a great place.
I love it. That's fantastic. This has been amazing. Just hearing who you are, learning some things. I love it because I walk away from here and who knows how many listeners will take something from this, but I took something from it. So for me, it's fantastic. So I appreciate it. If someone's interested, maybe, because for me as a man, it's tough sometimes. And you mentioned pressure earlier, just the amount of pressure you're under. If someone needs some help or wants to get involved with Gent's journey, like how do people find you? What's the best way?
Sure. Thanks so much for asking. So if you go to gentsjourney.co, there's no M on that. So that's gentsjourney.co/join. It's going to take you to our Substack. And we have some, like I talked about, packing for purpose. We have relationship courses. We have workout videos. Matt, the gentleman who I referred to, he has an amazing full body workout. We have, meetings where we're getting ready to interview somebody in terms of finances and, retirement planning. So we have tons of resources there. It's totally free. If you want to come in on some of the meetings and meet some of the experts, you can do that as well. But if you go to gentsjourney.co/join, you can join there. And then if you want to learn more about, myself, you can go to stephenseidel.com. So that's STEPHENSEIDEL.com. Would love to speak My mission is to inspire children of all ages, including the vulnerable children. So I volunteer at like Partners for Youth, Penn State, a lot of NIL programs. But at the end of the day, I'm just here to be of service to hopefully allow you guys to live your best life. So you can check me out over there. And if there's business owners and you want to go to stevenseidel.com/media, I have a really cool one sheet that gives you 4 platforms where there's experts and journalists that are looking for experts. So if you're an expert, whatever field that you may be in, you may be an expert journeyman like Jake, or some of these other things like a live event specialist, or just somebody who's really good at juggling. I don't know. But if you go to stevenseidel.com/media, you can find 4 different sites where you can get opportunities to really share your own story like we talked about and get listed on the bigger stages.
Fantastic. Appreciate you sharing that. What would you tell 5'3" Steven as he's about to graduate?
So first thing I would say is make sure to reach out to Alicia, because I went to high school with Pink. I played tennis with her brother, Jason Moore. I'd be like, make sure you reach out to Alicia and, let her know that she's a really good singer. Secondly, I think don't be so scared. Don't be so scared. Too often in this world, and I tell my daughter this all the time, and we talk about, I'm in a meditation group where it's just about like enlightenment, or, if you believe in God, Buddha, whomever, whatever it is, but it's about living in the moment. It's run by Pat Croce. He's a former Sixers general manager, but he says this, I'm borrowing it from him. Your thoughts are not true. Your thoughts are not you. Let them flow through. And he's like, the moment you can control the weather, you can control your thoughts. And too often we have these thoughts in our head. And as a people pleaser, I built so much of my foundation and my sense of self-worth on validation and acceptance as a young child. And so like I would stay home on Friday nights with my mom and watch 2020. And I was ashamed of that. And I was scared, will they make fun of you? Or, are you going to do something wrong? Or, how are you going to get to whatever? It doesn't even matter. Figure out what you like and just go for it. And if they're not cool with it, then that's their problem.
I love it. Thank you so much, Steven, for coming on Journey with Jake.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And for anybody out there, if you've been wanting to say something to anybody, friend, family, fellow coworker, just tell them, be honest, go heart to heart and share something, because you never know when it may be too late. And in my TEDx talk, I'm going to leave you guys with this Rumi quote. Oftentimes we've lost people, our pets, our loved ones. Goodbyes are only for those who love with their eyes, because for those who love with their heart and soul, there's no such thing as separation. They're still with us.
Love it.
What an inspiring conversation with Steven Seidel. I love how he reminds us that every chapter in life has something to teach us, and that connection truly is one of our greatest adventures. If you'd like to learn more about Steven and the incredible work he's doing to create safe spaces for men, visit stevenseidel.com and gentsjourney.co. Both are great places to dive deeper into his message and community. As always, thank you for tuning in and for being part of the Journey with Jake community. Your support, your shares, your reviews truly make a difference, and they help this show continue to grow and reach even more people with stories just like Steven's. And make sure to join me tomorrow, Thanksgiving, for a special bonus episode with my former guest, Rand Timmerman. We'll dive deeper into his harrowing experience as a soldier in Vietnam. It's one of those powerful, heartfelt conversations. You won't want to miss it. Just remember, it's not always about the destination, as it is about the journey. Take care, everybody.